speakers lined up. We will start with a review video of the minister's speech, which we could not play yesterday. And followed by that, we'll have Mr. Akhandadhi Dasa with a lecture on the need of a new paradigm in face of modern scientific advances, followed by a Q&A session. And after a short break, we'll have Dr. Mauricio Garrido lecturing on deciphering the Puranic universe, Bhumandala, as a horizontal plane. And after that, Dr. Jyotiranjan Buria on unlocking scriptural mysteries and scientific rationality, with the concluding session by Professor Suresh Balla on the science and spirituality, the path forward, with concluding remarks from our team. And it's a great privilege to have all of you again. Hope you have a wonderful session today. And as they say, if everything holds good, this session should be much better, because yesterday we had some technical glitches and so we decided to zoom in on Zoom. Hopefully all of you will have a good time. So please do switch off your mobiles or put them on vibrator mode, or as the case may be. There is a ringing bell coming all the time. The technical team might look at it. Someone's mobile or something is ringing. Thank you very much for joining us again. So let's start with the video by the Honorable Minister of Education, the Government of India. You want to play that video, Parveen?
They have no evidence to prove that, but their problem is they cannot find anything within the brain that could account for consciousness and or could account for free will. So in one sense, you could say they're right. If we were the brain, there would be no free will. We'd just be neural zombies, automatons. But as we've shown, there's no reason to believe that we are just the brain. Oh, my picture has disappeared again. This will happen at different points. So there's no reason to believe that we are just the brain. So this paradigm of accepting the Atma as a fundamental conscious entity supports our conviction of free will and also the power of agency of the Atma. The Atma, in descriptions in the Bhagavad, is considered to be hetu, causal. It has agency in this world, and that agency starts with its volition, its expression of will. And I define will as the Atma's wish to vary the content and quality of its own experiences. So for today, I can only offer a very simplified picture of how the Vedic texts explain the process. And we'll start with a topic that was described very well yesterday by Professor Behera. He was analyzing what matter's made of. And we're taught in college and school that the stuff we term matter is everything that makes up our bodies, the buildings, the land, the trees, the creepy crawlies, the life, mountains, seas, everything. It's all made up of atoms and molecules. And that inside the atoms, there are smaller particles called nucleons, the protons and the neutrons. And the protons and neutrons are also composed of smaller things, quarks and gluons holding them together. And then there are the electrons surrounding the nucleus. And when we get down to this subatomic level of particle physics, we have electrons, quarks, gluons, and other kind of exotic particles. We can call them objects, sort of, but really they can only be defined in terms of the properties they manifest and how those properties interact with others. So we know them by what they are like and what they do, not what they are. And in many cases, we haven't seen them, we haven't interacted with them, but we've seen that we have given them properties. We've assigned properties to them in order to explain what they would do. So physicists never claim they understand what matter is or what it is made of. Physics models properties and interactions. And even that's not going far enough these days. Now we describe things like electrons, photons, quarks as packets of energy and information. And sometimes the packet manifests itself as what we call a wave, or sometimes it manifests as a thing we call a particle. And physicist Sean Carroll pointed out that the underlying information state that specifies whether a packet of information sees itself as a wave or presents itself as a particle, that counts as reality, because it is the information state that conveys materiality to matter, the matter that we think of as the hard stuff. So this is interesting. Modern physics is kind of developing a concept of matter as energy and information manifesting observable properties. And that has such close parallels with the metaphysical model described by the Sankhya school of philosophy. That everything we call physical stuff is composed of energy and information manifesting observable properties. But there's a difference between how Sankhya and modern physics model those observable properties and how they categorize them. Physics breaks them down into properties of mass, spin, and charge. That's great for physics and electronics and chemistry, but it reveals nothing about mind or consciousness. So it has its use, but we have to recognize its limitations. And it is certainly not a complete picture because it leaves out the most important thing, the entities that are doing the observation, consciousness. Whereas Sankhya categorizes the energy and information that we call physical stuff in terms of its properties as experienced by consciousness. So it is able to integrate consciousness and matter together. And that's a bigger picture of reality. So whereas modern physics is really only coming to terms with the concept of information as an actual facet of reality, Sankhya already has advanced metaphysics linking consciousness, information, and matter. So let's talk a little bit about information in just a couple of minutes. The standard definition of information is that which is represented or which defines a particular arrangement of things. So in Sankhya terms, everything that exists contains information. And the information that it contains determines and manifests its properties. So here we have our red ball. The information within this red ball specifies that it is spherical. It's not a cube. It has a diameter, say, of 300 millimeters a foot. It reflects light at 700 nanometers, so it appears to us as red. It is smooth to touch and so on. So Sankhya sees information as that which specifies the properties of the functions of an object. And it does that through the interaction of tanmatras inhering on the Mahabhuta substrates. That's a whole subject in itself. So amongst other things, information gives form to an object. So just like a potter takes clay, which has a low information content, and the potter injects new additional information to that clay, that then produces and specifies the form, which has the qualities of the pot. So specifying information, acting on the potential of material ingredients, produces the specific properties related to a particular physical manifestation. This is crucial for both physics and metaphysics. Sankhya explains that this type of specifying information is composed of a combination of three forces acting on physical nature. And these three forces, or modes of operation, affect the way that physical nature manifests and behaves. So the three forces or modes are entropy. And this is understood. Science understands that entropy is an effect we see in matter. It reduces its state of order. It produces deterioration, decay, dissolution, inertia. And then formation is also now being recognized by physics as a kind of force which seems to be going on within nature that produces synthesis and generation and action and creation. It increases order and complexity. And thirdly, stasis, not understood so well by physics, but it's an effect which is seen as continuity, preservation, maintenance, durability, permanence, longevity. So these three forces compete against one another, and all the information contained within matter can be modeled as a combination of the effects of each of them. So we can show this then, or represent this as a kind of three-pointed spectrum of a triangle: stasis, formation, entropy. And many of you already recognized that these three modes relate to the three gunas, or qualities of modes presented in Vedanta, Sankhya, and Yoga. Sattva as stasis, rajas formation, tamas and entropy. And within the Atma Paradigm, we use the concept of guna data, which we're kind of saying is a specific complex combination of the powers of each of those three modes or gunas in one little packet. So a particular packet of guna data would represent the information combination of a certain amount of stasis, a certain amount of formation, and a certain amount of entropy. Now, most often I hear people speak of the modes, gunas, as influencing factors on human psychology. And that's, of course, real and valid. But I suggest we understand the gunas have a much greater metaphysical significance because they determine the properties of all prakriti reality. They specify the properties of everything that manifests in this universe. The gunas are the information content that allows prakriti to manifest itself in a way that it does to our senses. And the important factor for science is that this information content can be affected directly by consciousness. So here's how. When we as conscious entities express our will, that will is converted into intention by the mind. And every intention we have can be categorized and encoded as a specific set of guna data. For instance, we might have a general idea that I want to have something to enjoy. And our mind takes that broad idea, that broad will, and turns it into something specific. Let's have something to eat, for instance. Always a good one. And then the mind starts working on even more specific ideas. You know, what shall I eat? Okay, I'd like to have a samosa. So every idea and desire we have is a combination of gunas. And sometimes you can see which one is more prominent, like a choice of samosa. So if it's a perfectly spiced vegetable samosa fried in ghee, there's lots of sattva. Or if it's far too spicy with piyaj and lasoon, there's a fair bit of rajas in there. Or if it's monks, tamas. So that same combination of guna data that makes up our intention is conveyed into physical action and manifestation. Let me give you a simple example as evidence of this. This is even an experiment that you can do for yourself at home. Cook a batch of rice, and put exactly the same amount of rice from the similar area of the pot into two containers. Label one of the containers thanks and the other one fool, or I use the words prasad and muda. And here's what you do. You take the one that you've labeled thanks, prasad, and you praise it. You really appreciate its qualities of nutrition and flavor and how it is healthy and how it is giving life to your family. You really give all your love and appreciation to that rice. But the other one, the other container which you've marked food, pick it up and just tell it what tell it, give it, really criticize it. You're horrible, you're nasty, you're useless. Now that's a hard thing to do for any sensitive creature, but I did it twice a day, morning and evening, for half a minute praise on one and half a minute abuse on the other. And you really have to mean it. And I did that every day for a week. And here is the results. Here is what the rice looked like after 9 months. You can see the full one is starting to deteriorate. There's some mold on it. And the thanks one is, almost as it was. There's a few peas in there because it was my evening rice with peas. Now here it is after 18 months, where the fool has completely disintegrated into this foul-smelling liquor. It's just completely disintegrated, whereas the rice is still looking as it was. And here it is after 8 years. The rice that was thanked and appreciated is still retained its qualities. It's still, or at least retained its shape and its format, and with very little deterioration after 8 years. Whereas the fool one, after 18 months, it had deteriorated into liquor and it's got nowhere else to go. So this simple experiment shows the change that the modes can make to an object. By increasing the mode of entropy or tamas, we speed up its disintegration and decay. By increasing its mode of stasis or sattva, we impose durability and preserve it in a way that otherwise should not occur. So what's happening here is that our conscious intention, without any physical interaction with the rice, can change its durability, contravening the expectations of the laws of chemistry. Note, it doesn't contravene the laws of nature. It just contravenes our expectations according to the man-made laws of chemistry. So this is an indication of how consciousness, information, and matter actually relate and can interact together according to real laws of nature. So this ability of conscious intention to affect the behavior of physical systems, of course, has been done in much more kind of august setting than my home kitchen. It was done by the engineering department of Princeton University. They ran a program called Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research for 27 years. And their experiments involved the use of a random event generator. I'm not sure where all these little, someone's drawing on my screen. I'm not sure where all that's coming from. But their experiments used random event generators. Not one run on algorithms, it's run on the phenomenon of quantum tunneling. So the challenge for subjects was to change the proportion of electrons during that quantum tunneling just by their intentions. And here was their results. The red and blue lines and traces on this graph show the deflections that were achieved by the two sets of experiments. The red line is those trying to increase the number of electrons undergoing quantum tunneling, and the blue line are those trying to reduce the number of electrons tunneling. So Princeton published its analysis of these 800,000 trials and claimed that when they analyzed it statistically, it gave a significance equivalent to odds of 1 in 3 billion. So their conclusion was that the effect of conscious intent on physical systems is real. It is independent of time and distance. The subject doesn't need to be near the equipment to have this effect, and subjects can produce results from the equipment by expressing their intention even before or after the measurements are taken. They also concluded that the effect is enhanced when it's resonant. And what they mean by that is that when the subject feels a connection with the equipment, and particularly more so when a group of subjects express the same and intent, and it's aggregated together. So just to wrap up my presentation, and I see I've disappeared again. Science and philosophy has a big problem with information. Everything within the universe contains information. There's complex information at the beginning of the universe, and we see that in the precise fine-tuning of all the parameters and constants and ratios that the physical forces and particles have at the very moment of what is claimed as Big Bang. And there's information in the way that the cosmic processes unfold and form the specific structure of the universe. And there's incredibly complex information in all life forms, even the earliest that we've identified. And always the answer from the physicalist or naturalistic theories is that all this information boils down to chance. It somehow got there through these chance random interactions. Now, invoking, that's an idea that cannot be proved through science. You cannot prove chance by any scientific method. It's beyond causality. So invoking chance, however you want to articulate it and however clever it seems to be presented, it indicates a tacit failure of science to solve the riddle of why there is so much complex inherent information embedded in the specific forms that fill our universe. And that's why I'm calling on the scientific community to work with serious philosophers and to grasp the significance of consciousness, because through that, we can explain the presence of consciousness, of information. Because as we've heard from the Vedantic Sankhya Yoga sources, there's a real solution to the information problem. Because the only known source of novel specifying information that we can find in the universe is consciousness. Non-physical, non-biological, non-neural consciousness. And that is why consciousness should be a major issue for science in the 21st century. So with this vision, we can understand that all life is consciousness-based and that we live in a consciousness-based universe. So with this knowledge, not only can we improve our science, technology, medicine, and our quality of life in the here and now, but we also position ourselves to explore the realms of consciousness beyond the universes, consciousness in its free state. This is the potential that is offered within the Atma Paradigm. Now, if any of this is interest to you and you'd like to hear more, as Rishi Kumar said, we have a webinar series of 35 lectures on the Atma Paradigm, covering a lot more on consciousness, the metaphysics of matter and information, giving a whole analysis of biology and a different view of life and the appearance of the species, and also an analysis of how aggregated intention shapes our universe. It's all on our YouTube channel. So just go on YouTube, type in Atma Paradigm in the search and you'll find us. And we'd be very wonderful if any of you would like to get in touch and help the project and collaborate in study and research. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akhandadhi Dasa, Akhandadhi Prabhu. This is what makes it so interesting is that you showed so much about the intent, and it's so intrinsically linked to what we do in day-to-day life. And you talk about consciousness, and your whole content was about intent. I could see, and there is so much of information about information as well, even to the casual onlooker. It's just so interesting. And I request now Parveen to pick up, say, maybe the top couple of questions and seek the resolution of those questions by Prabhuji.
Yeah, so thank you, Akhandadhi Prabhu. So there are wonderful questions here. So one of the question is coming from Jitendra Kodilkar. He is asking how consciousness differ from Jagrat, means awake, dream, Sushupti, and what is Turiya state? In Veda, how scientific perspective can explain this?
First of all, take your point that the Jagruti aspect of awake state, dreaming, and deep sleep are considered to be states of our awareness. And states of awareness are things that I, as consciousness, experience. And again, we have to avoid the conflation that I was talking about earlier. Consciousness is not what state we're aware of, but rather consciousness is that which has that experience of those states. So it's an important aspect just to kind of keep those separate. And the interesting thing that is mentioned in Vedanta is that even in deep sleep, it is not that consciousness stops. And this is the kind of fault that Western philosophy has. It thinks of consciousness that, well, there's times when there's no consciousness, so let's just see what turns it on. It's like they think of it like a tap, that the brain turns on the tap, consciousness is produced. But the tap doesn't produce the water. The water is constantly there, but it flows through the tap. So Vedanta explains this in terms that even in deep sleep, consciousness is present and it never dies, it never is extinguished. But during deep sleep, because of our identification with the mind, in deep sleep, the mind is feeding us nothing. The senses are not, and nothing has been fed into it. In dreaming state, the mind is still feeding us stuff, so we are aware. But during deep sleep, the mind doesn't even feed us dreams. And therefore, when we awake from deep sleep, we have a recollection that I slept well, but there is nothing that I can identify with within deep sleep that tells me what was happening or what was going on or what I felt. Therefore, we think we were unconscious, but we're never totally unconscious. We're just at times conscious of nothing coming from the mind. So it's a kind of particular distinction that needs to be made. Turiya consciousness is what I alluded to at the end there, the idea of consciousness in its free state. Currently, our consciousness is given over to interacting with the world of Prakriti and experiencing it by what we're fed in our mind. So is there a state of consciousness that doesn't rely on that system of using the mind? And actually, when you look at the Vedanta and yoga systems, those are the things that they're talking about, that it is possible for consciousness to exist in its own pure, free state, and what that would be. And one of the talks in the Atma Paradigm analyzes what that nature of free consciousness might look like. So that's one of the talks there.
Okay, wonderful answer. So the second question is, can you please define mind?
Yes, we use this word mind to really pick up all the kind of psychological stuff that is not there, that is more than just brain activity, but it is the processing and the content of mental stuff, which includes all our thoughts, all our emotions, all our sensory perceptions, the pratyayas, which are the detailed impressions that come in, the sanskars, which are how those impressions may be stored within the mind, the vrittis, which kind of weave together various pratyayas and sanskars and ideas and feelings and feed us a kind of narrative. So the mind is all the psychological stuff that is presented to us. But we keep that separate from the conscious entity, which is the observer of all of that. And I think the best way to think of this is watching a film, say, in a theater. You are the Atma sitting in the audience, but the screen is presenting a story to you. Now, what is being presented on the screen is imagery, is sounds, but they are produced by, in these days, digital electrical signals in the computer processor. So there is the hardware of the computer, but that has to be taken and cast on a screen of awareness for you. So the mind is doing the interpretation of the hard data of the brain, it's processing it, it's converting it into a format that can be shown on the screen, and it is even the screen. That is the kind of nature of the Ankara. It represents the screen of our awareness. But we are the observer, the audience of what is going on the screen, and we're very grateful for that. We don't want to know what's going on in the background, we just want to enjoy the film.
So a lot of questions are coming, and I'm wondering how to take these questions because we are running short of time. So basically, what I was thinking, we'll have a separate question answer session with speakers. Maybe in coming weeks we'll organize that, and there will be no lecture, only question and answer. So I request audience to keep sending the questions there. We'll record all these questions and we'll answer each and every question, and you will get either voice bites and through mails we'll address all these questions. Thank you. So we can go to the next lecture. Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you, Akhandadhi Prabhu.
All
Thank
the
you.
best. Namaste.
This has been a remarkable afternoon. Thank you very much, Akhandadhi Prabhu, for sharing those wonderful words of, may I say, wisdom, and at the same time helping us contemplate on that voice from inside, how to define it, and quite a lot of information which is really from time immemorial captured. And you presented it in such a form that I could see from the chat responses that most of the participants are completely enamored by this coverage of the topic. And I welcome all of you to seek questions on the Atma Paradigm. And like Parveen said, we'll soon be sharing the details of the session when you'll have question answers with each of these speakers exclusively if you were to take it forward further. Thank you again. Going on to the next.